Hello everybody, welcome to WhatCulture Gaming. I'm Scott, joined by Josh.
Hello, Scott.
Josh, my friend, we went through this a little bit before. Big old Bloomberg report from Mr. Jason Schreier in regards to a whole bunch of stuff that Sony are doing internally. Cancelling Days Gone 2, as you do, remaking The Last of Us from 2013, as you do. And another part of that is sort of, I'm not going to say buried in the report, but it's only slightly alluded to until Schreier moves on from it. But is the existence of a new Uncharted game, whether it's Uncharted 5 or just whatever there's going to be as the next, as you do the next part of the franchise. But there is a new Uncharted game confirmed as being in the works from at least some members of Sony Bend.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we have heard rumors for like the past 3 years now, since there were rumors about this secret Sony San Diego studio, that they were going to be working on the next big Uncharted, because the team was comprised of a few previous Naughty Dog staffers and stuff like that, so it kind of made sense that they were going to work on it. But now Jason Schreier has come out with his Bloomberg report and essentially poo-pooed that idea and told us for certain what that team was working on, and it wasn't Uncharted 5. In fact, it was supposed to be a remake of the original Uncharted. Yes. And later on in that report, like you said, he did reveal that Sony Bend, who recently shipped Days Gone, was split into two teams. One of the teams was working with Naughty Dog on an unannounced multiplayer game that we don't know too much about, and another was tasked with creating a new Uncharted game.
Do you know what that is?
Go on.
Do you know what that is, Josh Brown?
Go
that
on, my friend.
Unannounced multiplayer game. I bet that's that SOCOM thing. I bet that's the thing that they hired the ex-Rainbow Six Siege people for. I would pay. I've got no money to throw down, but
Come on.
Fat wad, PH fat. I reckon that's what that is, my friend.
I will throw a crisp 50p pence dollar note. What do you even call a coin? A crisp 50 pence coin?
Whatever you've got, mate, it doesn't matter.
It's the Last of Us factions. I think it's going to be the Last of Us factions rather than a SOCOM thing, because this entire report
was announced though.
Essentially, it's only been like kind of announced. They've talked about it, but they haven't really said what it is. I think that might be it. But anyway, that's not even the point. We have to do an entire different video on that. The point there is that the second team in Sony Bend was tasked with creating the next Uncharted game, and this was described as being under supervision by Naughty Dog, but it doesn't seem like they had a direct hand in it like they were making this multiplayer game. So essentially it was just going to have their supervision to make sure it was in line with the previous entries in the series. Anyway, that was all until a few months ago, because now the status of the project is up in the air, because apparently the leadership of that project and of Sony Bend went to Sony and were like, look, we don't want to do this. We want to make our own games. We've just made Days Gone. You've turned down Days Gone 2. We don't want to just become, as they described in the report, Naughty Dog North. We don't want to become, assimilated into this larger studio. We don't think that's where our talents are best, where they lie the best. So they've been taken off this Uncharted project, but it presumably still exists in some form. We're going to get a new Uncharted in one form or another, but it's not going to be made by those specific people. I'm going to shut up because I want to know what you think, and I've talked way too much in the past video about this.
No, there's more than enough. I mean, you're the man with the details. You got all the. You managed to get through the report before the ad blocker got in the way. So it's just that if you've got all the info, it's the only way to be. But I think the whole thing with continuing Uncharted. I mean, Uncharted 4 does leave off with the idea of like Sam and Sully potentially teaming up and going forward, which is a weird sort of spiritual successor thing, because I think if you go, I was playing Dark Void the other day, and Nolan North is in that. And it was a whole time period where Nolan North was every single voice actor, and then Troy Baker sort of came up from 2013 onwards and sort of carried the torch forward. So if Uncharted was going to continue with the Sam character and Troy Baker in the lead role, it's a whole other conversation on whether Sam can work as a main character. But I was just thinking, like, spiritually it sort of makes sense, because Troy Baker can carry on the torch from where Nolan North left off. But whether or not the franchise, has legs after Uncharted 4 was so pretty definitively done in regards to, Drake. Like, there's not that much more you can do with him. But yeah, I don't know. Like, do you feel like there's more? Do people just want Uncharted games regardless of who stars in them? I mean, Lost Legacy is brilliant, so I guess you could do something like that again.
I mean, for me personally, Uncharted is done. Like, I got a very satisfying conclusion with Uncharted 4. Like, I'm not saying that Uncharted is Nathan Drake or Nathan Drake needs to be involved. Like you said, Lost Legacy proved that isn't at all the case. But at the same time, I'm eager for franchises to lay low for at least a little bit. Like, I don't need one right now. Maybe in another 5 years, maybe in another 10 years, I'd want Uncharted to come back. But for now, it kind of feels finished, and I want studios to make new things. Obviously, that's not what Sony wants, because this entire report is about them only wanting blockbusters and surefire bets. And ultimately, Uncharted is a surefire bet. Like, that series across its entire lifetime has sold a bucket load. Uncharted 4 specifically sold a hell of a lot. So it makes sense for them to want to continue it because people are going to buy it because it's a known thing. It's getting a movie with Tom Holland, this year. So obviously they still believe in the IP in general, and maybe they could do a young Drake thing, for instance, if they want to have him involved somehow. I know we've had previous segments with that in the other games, but maybe they want to go full on, recast his face like they did with Spider-Man's to make it more Tom Holland-esque. I don't know.
God.
But I think it's like an inevitability, especially for Sony. But personally, I think it could wait.
Well, that's kind of my thing. Is because the way that the report lays it out is that the new team that sort of needed they focused on doing a remake because it was just more financially viable rather than doing a new IP, or at least the way that's the way it sort of shook out, and they landed on remaking the original Uncharted. But if it was more planned in regards to the Uncharted brand on a wider sense, then they would do something to tie in with the new movie coming out, which I guess could be a re-release of the original game. But like you said, I mean they're meant to be doing young Drake in the movie and everything like that. So I don't know how much that stuff would line up anyway. But I just, in terms of the Uncharted brand, like it's that weird thing where Naughty Dog set Crash in motion and then gave him Eurocom stepped in and continued it for a bit, and it's only been now that Crash has finally got back to the sort of glory that he was in the original trilogy, and then they did Jak and Daxter for a bit, and then they moved on, and like the Lost Frontier, I forget the devs that did that, but it wasn't Naughty Dog, and then Uncharted hasn't been passed on to anybody yet. But it's just that weird state where Naughty Dog are in as a entity, where the last generation was the first time we saw them going back to established stuff rather than just doing a new IP, like Crash to Jak and Dax to Uncharted to Last of Us, and then just back to Last of Us and Uncharted again.
Yeah.
So I hope that they're not in that weird pattern where Sony are just sort of like, these are your bankable properties, and the report says that Sony very much give Naughty Dog leeway, but at the same time, Naughty Dog, same as Rockstar we mentioned in the other video, I don't ever want them just to be a greatest hits band. I want them to be, I want the new stuff, I want the new albums going forward.
Well, Scott Tailford, I've either had a brainwave or a brain freeze, and maybe you can clear this up. But who made Uncharted Golden Abyss? Was that Sonny Ben, or was it Ready at Dawn? Was it? Who was that?
Wrong.
Was it Sonny Ben?
That was Sonny Ben.
Right.
That's a hell of a point, because yes, that is one of the times that Uncharted was given to somebody else. And as a place, I should hand in my Vita card, because I should be flying the flag for Golden Abyss. It's brilliant. But yeah, I mean, very much made as a, for the Vita, it's made as a portable experience. It's obviously not one of the Uncharteds that most people have played. I would wager that more people have played Lost Legacy. But that did prove that the base tenets of Uncharted totally work, regardless of, I guess, which dev team you give it to, if they're talented enough, like they are, like with Sonny Bend. So yeah, I guess they do have the sort of pedigree for it to do something gameplay-wise. But for me, like, one of the big reasons that Uncharted 4 was such a tantalizing thing was that it was a thief's end. Like, all the going into it was like, does that mean Sully's gonna die? Does that mean something's gonna happen with Drake? And just what threads do you like pull on to do a fully fledged Uncharted, whether it's 5 or whatever, to make it worthwhile in a story sense, especially if those original story, Neil Druckmann, Bruce Straley, they're not there anymore.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's an interesting kind of like prospect, because there are so many different avenues you could go down, and it's on them to kind of like commit to one. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do, whether they rely very heavily on nostalgia and connections to the previous game. Like I said, maybe by going down the young Drake route, or doing something different with more recent characters like Sam, like you mentioned, for instance. But yeah, I don't want Naughty Dog to become this thing, or anyone in Sony, to be honest. I don't want anyone just having to rely on the same old franchises, trudging them back up, especially because, like we said in the previous video, the past generation especially was kind of defined by innovation. We got so many interesting new franchises like Horizon, like Days Gone, like Ghost of Tsushima, like Dreams, like Until Dawn and stuff like that. And to me, it is a complete backpedal to go away from that and go, no, we only want Uncharted, we only want The Last of Us, we only want sequels and things that we can bank on. And it's just mad, especially because, like you said, Naughty Dog is the prime example of why you should not do that. Like you said, they went from Crash to Jak to Uncharted to The Last of Us, and each one arguably got more successful, Like The Last of Us 1 was a new IP and sold gangbusters.
And it was always like a generational thing, like new console, new hardware. What can we do on this console? And then obviously The Last of Us came out at the tail end of the PS3, but the 8th generation was one of the only console generations where we didn't get a new Naughty Dog IP. And in their 30th anniversary art book, and obviously there's been interviews about it as well, they talked about sketching out a sci-fi IP, and that would apparently be the next direction that they would go in. And I personally would much rather see that from them than Last of Us remake, and I would much rather see Days Gone 2 or the continuation of that story from Sony Bend, rather than like sort of having to hobble together this, I don't know, I guess like this sort of a continuation of something that has been set in motion by somebody else. It's all very corporate thinking. It's all very what boxes can we tick that are less risk averse. But it's just like you said, it goes against the overall optics of the brand right now, which is Returnal's coming out soon. They're continuing the likes of Horizon. They've just put Destruction All Stars out. Like they have these new IPs. Like even Astro Boy's getting fleshed out quite a lot. But there's more that they could do.
Not to go back into the report too much, because this is supposed to be about Uncharted 5, but there was an interesting paragraph in there where Schreier was talking about how they completely didn't promote Dreams at all last year, even though it was getting really, really good reviews, and Dreams could have been something, but it was nowhere, no one marketed it, and I feel like Sony's done that with quite a few games recently, where it's almost like they can't be asked because they know it's not Uncharted 4, they know it's not Spider-Man 2 or anything, so you don't get their marketing might behind them. They kind of just sent out to die.
Fell off the radar.
Yeah, Concrete Genie. The way they've handled the PlayStation VR 2, where it's like, here's a blog post, here's some designs for the controllers, we're not going to tell you anymore, we're going to be kind of weird about it, and it's like,
all the stuff with
clear where their focus is.
The PS3, the PSP, the Vita, like all these catalog libraries, the maniacs like me are going out there and securing up all these games, whether they're physical editions or whatever, just so that they've got access to them. There's a lot of weird stuff with Sony at the minute, and it's weird because it reminds me of like the PS3 era, where they came off the massive success of the PS2, and then they just sort of, there was a lot of hubris, there was a lot of just, we're big Sony, we can do whatever we want, and it just paved the way for Microsoft and the 360 or Xbox and the 360 to come in and be for the gamers. It just, that console felt like it had players' interests in mind in a way that big corporate thinking doesn't. And Sony did so well in the last generation, bolstered by the fact that Xbox did a massive misstep with all the Don Matrick stuff at the beginning of that generation. And I just wonder if it's a case of everything flipping around again, where just it's I'm going to see how all the rest of the cards lie, kind of thing. But it's a weird place right now for Sony.
It is, and honestly, I can't go 2 videos without forgetting this, with forgetting this idea, because I want to bring up, yesterday we did the news that Hideo Kojima might be partnering with Microsoft for his next game and his studio's next game. And I think this adds more, maybe validity to that rumor that's going around. It's from Jeff Grubb anyway, who's usually pretty spot on, but if Sony is only wanting more Uncharted, more Last of Us, more recognizable brands, that kind of really does shut the door on creators like Kojima, who was all about, now that he's away from Metal Gear, doing mad stuff like Death Stranding, doing mad stuff in the Stadia, wanting to go crazy with new IP. And maybe Sony is just at the point now, under the new leadership, where they're like, well, we're not going to give you money for this, unless you give us Metal Gear Solid 6, or, the equivalent, go somewhere else, because we want to make Uncharted and we want to make Last of Us.
Yeah, that was always my assumption with him. Like, the rumor being that he's in talks with Xbox to do some sort of Xbox game going forward. But there's so much, a whole separate video's worth of stuff that's going on with how much Sony are detaching themselves from their Japanese origins or from the Japanese player base. Even changing the OK button to X rather than circle. That was like a big deal. And it would be if you grew up with that being the control scheme for so long. There's the whole fact with the PS5, the initial sales were terrible in Japan. Apparently it's like recovered a bit now. But Sony's reputation in Japan is a lot more negative right now, or a lot worse than it was. Like even a few years ago, and they're not helping themselves by actively, I guess it's being given away in this report, saying that they don't want to do the likes of Ape Escape, Gravity Rush, Japanese-centric games anymore, and they're shutting down Sony Japan, and it's just like, why? Like, I get that there's more money in the being this nebulous global entity, but that's also a more soulless way to be, and that's not the reason people fell in love with your brand in the first place. But like you said, that then opens up this massive space for Xbox to step in and just say, look, we've got the games that you want, we've got Hideo Kojima, we're letting creatives make the titles they want, and that is such obvious business in itself. So you would assume that at some point Sony stops pointing the gun at their own foot and realizes. But yes, let us know what you think down in the comments below of everything that we talked about, Uncharted 5, Days Gone 2 going away, and everything else. For now, I've been Scott from WhatCulture.com.
I've been Josh from WhatCulture.com.
I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.